Hey there everyone and welcome back to another Impressions video, and today we are going to be talking about this game right here. This is Genei Ibunroku Sharp FE, which is the game formerly known as Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem. And this game, I think I mean, it's the reason I bought a Wii U, basically. I bought the Wii U a year ago, maybe, but I bought it in anticipation for this game. And then the game that I imagined we were getting, and probably most people imagined we were getting, changed drastically into this. I think I should talk about that first because I know a lot of people are probably of the same thought process. Like, what the hell is up with this game? I think a lot of people went into it expecting what I was expecting, which is basically a Wii U version of Majin Tensei with Fire Emblem characters, which is essentially a strategy RPG like Fire Emblem, but more dark, more SMT level story, kind of dark. That would have been great. I would have been really excited for that. But our did we get that? No. This is not the game you were looking for. If this is what you were looking for, but the what we did get is this game Sharp FE, and it's rather different. And I think a lot of people are interested in, if you're still interested in the game, like even though it had this drastic change, like you're probably wondering, like, well, what the hell is up with it? What is it? What's it about? What's going on here? Am I gonna like this? If I was expecting something dark and something like SMT, or if I was expecting a lot of Fire Emblem characters, or I was expecting SMT characters, am I going to enjoy this game? I'll try to answer those questions for you in this um, impressions video because I have gone through this game. I beat it. I played a little bit of a second playthrough, just briefly, just to check out like some extra missions you might get. You do get some, but I'm not. I haven't done any of them because they're like level 99 boss battles, and I'm not level 99. So, um, yeah, we've got Sharp FE here. So let's first talk about how it looks because I think a lot of people are not, either you're in the camp where you're like, ooh, I like that, or you're in the camp, well, that was not what I wanted. Fuck this game. And I lean towards the second camp, but only because I don't really like the aesthetic. Here, if you look at the cover here, it doesn't look like SMT. It doesn't look like an SMT game because they're much darker. This looks like Fire Emblem had a kid with Idolmaster, and that's kind of the aesthetic, really. It's very similar to that. It's kind of a very like flamboyant idol kind of interface, and the design to it. It reminds me of aesthetically, it's a lot closer to Persona than it is to SMT, and it's not. But that being said, this game is not like Persona. If you like Persona and you think like I'm gonna play a game that's like Persona, this is not a game for you because it's not like Persona. Um, there's no deep character kind of interactions. There's no building, you know, talking to a lot of people to gain like your character kind of bonds. There's no kind of interaction with people that's has any like solid meaning in the game. I mean, it happens, but I mean, there's character development in the game, but it's part of the story. Like, there's nothing optional you can do. There's no like side characters where you're like getting deep stories out of them. It's not like that. It's not that kind of game. So aesthetically, it might look a bit like Persona, but it's not really like Persona beyond that. Like, enemies in the dungeons run around and you can hit them and with a sword knock them over before fighting to get an advantage in battle. That's Persona. But everything else for the game is not really like Persona. But I wanted to talk about the how it looks overall because it is kind of off-putting if you are expecting something dark because the game never really gets aesthetically dark. There's no demons in the game. The things you fight are more like in something like Persona 3, for example, where it's just like these kind of random enemy things that show up, and that's fine. I mean, I think it works for the game, and there's nothing really strongly like related to SMT in terms of enemies. So don't go into it expecting that because it's just not a thing. Um, but it looks good overall. Like even though I'm not like into the kind of colorful brightness of it all, um, what is presented is done really well. So if anybody has ever played SMT9 on the Xbox, it's it has this kind of similar kind of world, but when you walk around the towns, it's a bit darker because there's demons everywhere, and the story is a bit darker too. But this feels like a brighter version of the cities in that game. Like everything is much brighter, like more colorful, more kind of vibrant. And I mean that might be for some people. It's just not for me. I don't hate it. I just think like it could have been better as a more like the way nine is. And overall, I think this game itself is it does look good, but you know I think if you're worried about the aesthetic, like you think it's gonna put me off to the point where like I'm not gonna want to play it because it's too bright and sunny. I think if that kind of thing really bothers you, the game might bother you. But if you think like I'm not, I don't particularly care as long as it doesn't like look horrible. It doesn't look horrible. It just it's bright. That's all I can really say. So you know, beyond that though, what about it is you know what's going on with it? Why are there why is this no longer Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem? And there's like a lot of good reasons, even though it's very obviously connected to both of those games. Um, the the big thing about this game is that I think a lot of people have kind of thought about it like it's like it looks like Persona, so it's going to be like Persona, and it's really not. Um, if anything, if you've played any other SMT spin-off games, the game it's most like is Digital Devil Saga 1 and 2. The battle system is very close. It's got a lot more elements from that than it. I mean, a lot of the game has a lot more elements from Digital Devil Saga than it does Persona. So, and while Digital Devil Saga is a much darker story, and I think part two of that game has maybe the greatest video entrance for the like a game. It's so good. Um, but this game has very similar thing. It doesn't have a press turn system, but it does have the same kind of character progression. So the characters themselves level up, and instead of like in Digital Devil Saga having a demon form, they have the Fire Emblem character attached to each character, and this character is like just attached to them. It doesn't do anything. They like sort of meld together when they fight. Their costumes will change to match the Fire Emblem character. I mean, initially, you can change the costumes at will, but initially when they show up, it's like they've merged with the Fire Emblem character in order to have this new form. And much like Digital Devil Saga when they merge with the Demon Self or whatever. And they also the battle system has a lot of the same elements. The characters themselves learn skills. They you have a list of skills you can do, kind of regular skills and passive skills and session skills. I'll talk about that later. But you've got a lot of things you can do for the skills, but you know you have a limited amount of slots. So like DDS, you have to move, you know, take the skills you want and specialize characters in the way you want because you can't take every skill. Um, Also, you can switch characters on the fly, so you can have three characters in battle at any time. But like DDS, you can switch characters out like in the middle of the battle if you want to. Has no effect on like the progress of the battle in the sense that if you're a character and you don't have the skill you want, but another character who's not in the battle has it, you can swap them, and it doesn't you don't lose a turn. They just go to the next character, and then it's their turn. So it's much like Digital Devil Saga in that way. You also have, like I said, there's no press turn system, but there is a similar kind of combo system. So, unlike the press turn, which gives you an extra action by hitting a weak point, this gives you, well, by hitting a weak point on a character, you get a combo. And the combos are called sessions. So you each character has certain session skills that link them to other characters. So by getting a session skill, like for example, say I have an ice attack, and this character is specialized in ice attacks. So they'll throw out an ice attack, and another character, and it happens to be the weak point of the enemy. Another character who has a session skill that links some other type of attack to an ice attack will come in and do a combo. And once you get enough characters, well, I mean, initially in the game, you can only do three. Your biggest session is three because you have no, first you have no other characters, but you also have no way to link them. But as the game progresses and you get more characters and you get more skills, you'll be able to link characters who aren't in battle. That's like one of the first like expansions to your sessions. Like you'll get an extra character, and then they'll get abilities to link combos from outside of battle. So three people are in the battle at any time, but everybody else you imagine is on the outskirts waiting to jump in for their combo hit. And eventually, you'll be able to bump it up to six combo, a 6 run combo or 6 session combo. And eventually you'll get more skills and more skills. And eventually it gets really big. So you'll get like 20 combo, 20 hit session, and it'll be like Knights of the Round in Final Fantasy. You're just like, oh man, this 20 hit combo is going to take forever. I'm just going to put the controller down and watch, because that's kind of how it is towards the end of the game when you get so many sessions in a row that it just, it gets really long. And this happens in the game. So it's a very kind of expansive system. You, depending on how you give people session skills, they'll connect in different ways. And how you focus the character changes the way that the sessions work. So sometimes you'll get, if you focus people on magic, they'll only session with magical attack, which is bad against some things because it means the session will end because the boss or enemy you're fighting is immune to a magic, certain type of magic at least. And that happens a bunch. So sometimes it's good to have like 2 different types of attacks in your sessions if you're linking them to certain people. And if you want to get really into it, you can make like a kind of chart of who is connected to who and what tech should they have to go either way, so that you can make the longest possible sessions. It does involve a little bit of thought, but you could do it randomly and probably still get by okay. But obviously, if you're really into it, it does kind of give you a lot of options to customize. First, who attacks in combo with you, but also who you attack in combo with, and what type of attack you would go in combo with. So if you're working a lot of physical attacks, you might not want to take a lot of non-physical session attacks. It's pretty in depth for a combo system, because it does give you a lot of options for comboing, but it also gives you a lot of options for customization, which is really nice. I mean, it's deep enough to like make you want to think about it. So I think they did a good job with it. Even though it's not a press turn system, it still works out really well in that you do get to think about going into the battle with a kind of plan. And sometimes a plan works with the sessions, in that like you'll get a really weak enemy that you can kill in one shot. And by doing that, you can get something called an overkill session, which means like you can attack enemies that don't have a weak spot with a session. So some enemies will be immune to your types of magic or your types of attacks, but by doing an overkill on a weaker enemy, you can attack that enemy with the full session afterwards. They'll just cycle to the next enemy, and you'll get the full attack on that enemy instead, and it won't have any of its immunities. So it's a way around kind of especially defensive enemies, which is it's a pretty good system. It does involve a lot more strategy than you would expect from a standard kind of turn-based RPG that doesn't have like a more in-depth battle system. And I like that. I think it was a really good system. And overall, it's like a lot more like Digital Devil Saga in terms of battle system. So it's good. I mean, the battle system, I was really surprised at how enjoyable it is. It also uses the Shin Megami Tensei battle system in terms of attacks. So you'll recognize all the magic names. They're the same as Persona, the same as SMT. Um, I'm trying to remember. Um, yeah, I think it's the same as. I know they changed the name of one of the magic, but between SMT and or early SMT and Persona and stuff, but I think they're all unified now. So I think it's the same. But whatever, it's not really important. But anyway, the what else we have to talk about here? We've got a lot of stuff to go into with this game because I'm sure people who are interested are really interested in if they should get it and if they're going to like it. And let me talk about the dungeons because there are a lot of dungeons in the game, but you do have to go back to dungeons a bunch of times. There's a lot of side quests that involve going to back to dungeons or like doing things within the dungeon. So I think if you there is it's like a bit of reusing dungeons, but it's not like excessive. There's no point where you have to go through an entire dungeon again. And usually you if you have a side quest, you can warp to different parts of the dungeon easily. So it doesn't ever feel excessive, even though sometimes you're going back to dungeons like multiple times because multiple different routes open up later on. Like there'll be areas you couldn't get to before that will open, and there'll be stronger enemies and stuff. So it's like a using the same kind of dungeon aesthetic, but opening up a whole new section that's different. So it doesn't feel terrible. I mean, it feels like they reused assets, but not like they reused the dungeon because it's essentially a different dungeon with just the same stuff. Um, it's not bad though. It never feels terrible. Like, oh, I can't believe I'm back in this dungeon doing the same dungeon again because it's never really like that. And even when they go back to the same dungeon, there's usually some kind of difference that makes it not feel like, oh, I'm just back here doing the same thing. So it's worth it. It's worthwhile to go into that. And the design of the dungeons is done really well. They're not usually very simple, which is nice. Sometimes there's like kind of dungeon based puzzles with, like either teleporters or moving kind of platforms and things that you have to figure out how to get to certain places and how to move between places in a way that's logical. It's quite nice. I think the dungeons are designed really well, and it doesn't ever feel like excessive. It never feels like, oh my god, I just want to finish this dungeon. They're not incredibly long, but they're not too short, so they're kind of paced in a really good way. And there's never too many enemies either. And also, avoiding enemies is really easy in this game. So if you're like, oh, I'm tired of fighting, I just want to run through this dungeon, you can do it because when enemies appear on the screen, you can knock them away with a sword and they fall down, and you can just not go towards them. By doing that, they'll disappear and you don't have to fight. So it's a pretty easy kind of way to go through the game if you don't want to fight that much. So it's very kind of customizable for how you want to play. And it's helpful later on. Sometimes when you're like going through parts of an old dungeon, you're just kind of like, oh, well, maybe I should, uh, just knock enemies out of the way and do what I'm doing because that makes more sense. And it does. So, yeah, overall, I think the dungeons are pretty good. I don't really have any dungeons in the game that I particularly disliked or anything. I didn't think any of them were like, oh, this wasn't so good. Um, and I didn't think any of them were overly difficult, but I didn't think any of them were overly easy either. So I think it does a really good job of kind of being a balanced game. There's no, I didn't feel like this is too difficult ever, but I never felt like it's too easy. I mean, there's parts where I felt like um, it was like not incredibly hard, but I didn't feel like, oh man, this is way too easy. I don't have to think. I don't even have to think about this. Um, when you fight the bosses, you have to kind of think about how you're going to connect your sessions and all that. So it actually does matter, and it makes it like even for bosses that I didn't have an incredibly tough time with, and weren't many bosses in the game that I lost to. Like I never um, was like getting total party kills or anything on bosses in this game. And I played. I mean, should say it. I played on the normal difficulty setting, which I usually do for games when I play them the first time, just because I go into games assuming that the normal difficulty level is the difficulty level that the developers expect people to play at, and higher or lower levels are for either people who want a better challenge or people who want a an easier game, respectively. And I generally go in expecting to play how the developers expect the game to be played, which is I assume is the normal difficulty setting. In some games, it's not like, but usually you kind of know what games those are, and if a game is good, like you know, Digital Devil Saga or SMT 3 or 4 or whatever. Those I mean I'm thinking of those because like I have videos of talking about the higher difficulty levels on my channel. Where like SMT4 I played through like 5 times, and like eventually by that time I'm just kind of like it's got to be on a higher difficulty because it's too easy now. And so I eventually, if I play a game multiple times, I'll usually bump up the difficulty, but first time I always play on normal. So playing on normal, it never felt too difficult. It felt, basically all right, normal kind of balance. And I think playing on normal, that's expected. So I didn't feel it was incredibly difficult or incredibly unfair at any point. It does offer you a lot of times to grind if you think you're not strong enough. There's an arena later on in the game. There's lots of characters. I mean, there's lots of ways to get enemies to come fight against you, and there's lots of ways to just grind if you're really into it for some reason. It's never really necessary, and I found that like I was more often grinding to get skills than I was grinding to get levels. So like I'd be like, well, I don't really feel like I'm underpowered, but I really want this next skill on this sword, so I'm gonna go fight enemies to get more points to not go up a level, but just to get the next skill. And so, I mean, I think by the end of the game I was like level 62 or something, maybe a little higher for some characters. Like the main character is you can't swap out of the party, so he's always the highest level. Maybe he was 64, but most of the other party was like 60 to 62 at the highest. And that even felt like a little too high. And I think mostly I was that high because I was trying to figure out if there was something special in the by clearing a lot of the what's it called, the arena. You get special things for getting a certain amount of coins, and I did it for a while, but like I never felt like I was getting better stuff every time I got it, so like I gave up. I never So I don't know if there's like some kind of special item you get after a certain threshold of coins in the arena. Possibly there is, but I don't think it would be something like special weapons or anything, because there doesn't seem to be slots for extra weapons in the game beyond what you're offered. So I don't know what it could be, special items or like things to raise stats, but you can get that in other ways in the game too. So it's not exactly like, I think maybe it's not the greatest investment of time, but it is an easy way in the kind of mid game to get a lot of skill points really quickly doing the arena. So that's a thing that I was doing for a while, which is probably why I ended up like a little maybe a little too high in level towards the end. I'm trying to think about what else is there. Like there aren't a lot of I mean, there's no SMT characters. I think I mentioned that, but there are no SMT connections. There's no demons. There's no characters. There's nothing really beyond that. It's in Tokyo, and there's characters that can use like the SMT kind of magic and skills. But there are Fire Emblem characters, a bunch of Fire Emblem characters, and each character has a Fire Emblem character attached to them. But also you get interactions with some other Fire Emblem characters Uh, Tiki is one of them. I think that's her name in English. Um, she's like the dragon girl in Fire Emblem game. She's like a dragon, but she looks like a little girl. Um, and there are what else? There's a bunch of characters that show up later in the game, sort of. Their names show up and their spirits show up, but the character models do not. So it's like they'll talk and they'll say things as those characters, but their models are not really the character. So I mean that might be disappointing for some people if you're like really excited for some character and he only shows up that way. That kind of happens towards the end, but you do get like this kind of um, characters you'd expect to show up do show up for the most part, being as vague as I can. Um, but beyond that, there's not a ton of Fire Emblem stuff in the game beyond the story being definitely a kind of Fire Emblem story. I mean, the boss is a Fire Emblem boss. All the bosses are Fire Emblem bosses. But the main story, like the main kind of big bad boss at the end, is definitely a Fire Emblem thing. You'll recognize it if you've played um, Fire Emblem games. Basically, it's pretty recognizable. Um, but yeah, I think there are some really good points about this game that I'm trying to think. How would I explain it to someone who was really excited for Shin Megami Tensei Cross Fire Emblem, but got this instead? Um, I would say give it a chance if you liked if you like Fire Emblem and you like um, kind of Digital Devil Saga style dungeon crawling. And I guess like it's not exactly like the dungeon crawling is not exactly like Persona. It's not very similar to that. It feels different. It feels more like DDS to me. So if you're just like I love Persona, maybe you'll like this game for the music. The music is very pop music. I don't know any of the artists that do the songs in this game, like because I'm not into J-pop, but it is done by like a real J-pop record label. So I assume that um, there are a bunch of kind of actual J-pop artists doing the songs because the songs for what they are, I'm not like into them, but they're catchy enough. For some of them, they're pretty catchy, and like the main theme is pretty catchy. Um, but if you're into J-pop, you might enjoy a lot of the things because each of the characters kind of get their own songs in the game, and they'll get duets later on that work as combos in the game, and they'll kind of do like a short version of the song during the battle. So you'll get to hear a bunch of the songs a bunch of times. I mean, you can skip it though; they're skippable. But if you enjoy it, you probably want to watch it because it's fun for you, I guess. I don't know. I assume that's why these things are in the game. Um, but it's not oppressive. Like originally when I started the game, I thought like, "Oh my god, do not do this to me." After the first chapter, I was like ready to take the game out when and not this is like a minute period where I was just like, I'm gonna smash this game if this is what they're gonna make me do, because like there's a thing where like you kind of go through it and you're like, I'm like, oh, this is kind of not like what I was expecting. I was expecting a lot more like idol stuff to be in here, like it's gonna be really J-pop heavy and I'm gonna have to do like dance training and stuff, and then like it didn't happen in the first chapter. I was like, oh well, maybe it's not. And then at the end they're like, oh yeah, you got to do all this training, and I was like, oh damn, don't do this to me, game, don't do this. And it turns out that the training is not like mini games and stuff, and I was really 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 worried that it was going to be full of like music rhythm games and like mini games for dancing and stuff like that, and I just thought like, please do not do that. And it doesn't. Thankfully, it does not do that. It gives you all the training sessions are basically just character development sections. You talk to characters and you do things. And all the training parts are mostly cut out. So like you'll just like you got to do this training and you go to the training and you'll talk to some characters, and or like the training will be over when you get there. Like you'll get there and it'll just cut out the training and you'll just have like a conversation afterwards. So that's a thing. If you're really worried about it, like I was, um, you can like breathe a sigh of relief because that's not in the game, and I was really, really worried that it would be. So if you're worried about that kind of thing, do not worry because it's not in the game. It doesn't. The idle stuff, while it's ever present, is not intrusive to the point where it's annoying. So even if you're not a fan like I am, I guess I am not. um, it's it's not it's not so bad even though it's there. Like you're constantly going to. I mean, you're kind of like home. Your base is like the kind of idol management office. So there's always like idol and like kind of celebrity related things going on, but they kind of translate into the game in a way that like you're not doing these kinds of things. It just happens to be the setting for like you have to go to this concert to see this thing, but there's a dungeon there. So it's not like you're doing um, really these music type of things. It's just like you do the dungeon, and it somehow affects these characters in the idol world, I guess. And that's kind of how things work. So it's the idol thing is not incredibly intrusive, but if you like that kind of thing, you'll probably enjoy the game. Um, you'll enjoy a lot of the parts of it. You'll enjoy seeing this kind of thing and kind of being a part of that kind of thing. I just kind of found it like ho hum. Like I don't care about this, but like I guess it serves the story well, and it's not annoying or horribly intrusive to the RPG element, which is the main part of the game. So I felt like it's pretty good. It's not that bad, even if you don't particularly like that thing and you don't like the aesthetic either. Which because I'm in that category. Like I don't think the game looks bad in that it doesn't have a like any problems with how it looks. Like there's nothing poorly made, and it doesn't look amateurish or in any way. It looks quite good. It's just not my thing. So I feel like I'm not a huge fan of the aesthetic, and I'm not a huge fan of the idol world. But despite that, the game ends up being pretty good for what it is because the battle system is good and it's kind of got a bit of depth to it, and the dungeons are designed well, and the challenge of the RPG is there. So there's lots of things going on, and it makes it pretty good. There's other things you can do. There's kind of a luck system that sometimes will change your attacks to a stronger version of that attack, and there's like a eating at restaurants thing that is like a way that you can recover health outside of a dungeon. But when you eat at certain restaurants, depending on the thing you pick, like the luck of characters will go up or down. So it's kind of a thing. So if you have certain characters who are doing certain things, you'll want to, get this certain type of food to change their luck to be higher for whatever you're doing in the dungeon. If you're really into it, it's not like a necessary thing, but it's an extra layer added on that could make your gameplay a bit more exciting or a bit more interesting for you. And I tended to use it because it was helpful. Especially when I was in the last boss, it was super helpful because I kept getting it to happen. I had like a certain character I used pretty main as the main damage dealer for the boss, and putting that character at the highest luck meant that like I was almost every other turn was getting like a special attack out of it, and it was like made the made the battle really easy. So, yeah, overall though, I would actually recommend this game. It was a lot better than I was expecting it to be. I was expecting Nightmare because of just the way it all looked. And like from the trailer, you look at it and you think like, am I gonna have to do performances? Am I gonna have to do this thing? Because you look at it and the battles kind of take place in the like a performing arena, and it's really just like a battle stage. It's not an actual place. So there's nothing like that, like you might imagine there would be. So that tends to be like a lot of the worries I had were kind of gone after I played about an hour of the game until like the end of the first chapter where I was like, oh no. But even that was unfounded because it didn't end up being anywhere near none of the bad things that I thought might be in the game were in the game. So I was actually quite surprised at how good it was. Yeah, and that might be because I went into it with kind of low expectations after like being a bit disappointed that it wasn't going to be a strategy RPG and it wasn't going to be a what I and many other people were hoping it would be. But it ended up being a pretty good game, and I don't have any complaints about it. I think I quite enjoyed my playthrough of this game, and I would recommend it for um, if you have a Wii U, which is probably not that many of you. But if you have a Wii U and you're looking for, if you're a huge RPG fan and you really wanted the Wii U for some reason, um, it's probably for you. But if you're probably if you're a big RPG fan, you might not have a Wii U. But if you happen to have one because you also like Nintendo games, there is an RPG on the system that you might want to play, and it's this one. Um, I don't know. The Wii U has been overall kind of a disappointment for me. I was expecting much more out of it, and that's not to say that it's bad because I like the system. It just doesn't have any games, and I'm not a Nintendo fan. So like, I'm that rare person who buys Nintendo consoles for non-Nintendo games, and I bought the Wii U for non-Nintendo games, and it didn't really disappoint me in that there were enough games that I felt like I was feeling good about buying the system. For the Wii U, not so much. Uh, there there are lists of games in development for the Wii U, and it's like graveyard. There's nothing. No third. There's like virtually no third party games except for like Just Dance games, and there's. I think this very well may be the last Wii U game I buy, because there's just nothing else coming. As far as I know, there's nothing else coming at least, unless like Nintendo and third-party companies are being really tight-lipped about the things that are coming out for the Wii U before its inevitable demise in the coming year or two, I guess. There doesn't appear to be a lot coming for it, and I guess like if I had to go out with a bang on the system, I guess it would be this. Even though like I don't I have less than 10 games for the Wii U, and I think like that's not a good thing. That's bad when you have a system that can't even put out enough games for someone like me who plays a lot of games to find more than 10 games. I think I have maybe 8 games for the system. And not being a Nintendo fan, that makes the selection really low. And it wasn't on the Wii, which is, there's a lot of kind of third party games that might not be, I mean, weren't on other systems, but also are a bit more interesting. Just didn't show up on the Wii U, well, like I was expecting it to. And that's kind of sad. It means I'm not going to buy the next Nintendo console, whatever it is, unless I'm sure that there's a lot of stuff I want on it. That's basically what it means. But Sharp FE, if you don't have a Wii U right now, it's probably not worth buying a Wii U just to play this game. But if you have other games on the Wii U that you're interested in and you like RPGs, there's not a lot of options on the Wii U, but this is a good one. I mean, it's worth if you have a Wii U, it's definitely worth buying, um, and I would say that you should do that. So, yeah, that's about it. If you guys have any questions, I'm sure I forgot stuff that I wanted to talk about. It always happens to me with these videos. Like after I turn it off, I'm like, oh, I should have talked about that. But if you have any questions, anything else you want to ask me about the game, um, feel free to, ask in the comments below. If you've played it, feel free to let me know what you thought about it. Um, Unless this is like months later, because I almost never reply to comments on really old videos. Sorry, I just don't. But you know, that's the thing. I often get comments on very old videos, about announcements for localizations, and I think like you couldn't possibly be telling a person who cared less. uh, like I often get video, I get every time a game that I've played, I've done an impressions video for that's like a Japan only game gets like 8 months later gets an announcement for a localization. Like 3 people will come and put it's they're not. I don't know if they're people who are subscribed to me or not. They're just people who are looking for reviews of the game or whatever show up and they'll like write a comment like, "Hey, this game is. You must be really happy. This game's getting localized." And I think like, Why would I be happy? I've already played the game. I I read Japanese. I don't need a localization. I don't know why people feel the need to comment on my videos for that, but they always do. It's inevitable. It always happens. So don't do that here. I know it's being localized for the in English, um, but it's one of the things that I always feel like I am not the audience for localization. It's not me. Don't I don't know why people always feel the need to tell me. Um, but yeah, that's like neither here nor there. That's a total side thing that I think is just like a quirk of YouTube and my maybe my channel specifically, but it's a thing. So anyway, I'm done rambling about this. It's a pretty long video, as all my videos are, because as I've mentioned before, the theme of my channel is dude rambling in front of a camera. So that's about it. That's all I can say about Sharp FE. I did put it on my top games of 2015, and it deserves the spot it got. As I said in that video, I had only the final boss to beat, and I did that. So I'm done with the game, and I played a bit more of it, and it's good. Will I play through the second time? Not right away, but I might in the future, just to go through and defeat the special bosses. Um, there is a level, like I said, there is a level 99 special boss that I should go in and fight, but I don't particularly feel the need to at the moment. So eventually I'll do that. Maybe I'll record a video of it. Maybe not. Who knows? But anyway, I will talk to you guys sometime in the future, whatever the next game I talk about is. I'm not sure of the release date, but it's probably going to be SMT 4 Final. I think that's the next game that I'm buying that's coming out soon. I think it comes out maybe at the end of this month or um, at the beginning of next month. I don't really remember. But yeah, that'll be it. And then of course Dark Souls 3 and some other stuff probably. I'm trying to think of what I have pre-ordered, but I think I only have SMT Final and SMT 4 Final and Dark Souls 3 at the moment. So yeah, that's it. I will see you guys next time.